wait, with me as per usual in my little hidey hole, the Hobbit and everything else, and I have with me my very, very good friend, Mr. Luke Miller. How are you, sir?
Good. Ready for the podcast today. I love doing Q&A questions because it's just like so direct for what people are wanting to hear. So it's going to be a good conversation for sure.
It's so much fun. I really love the Q&A stuff. So I'm always into the Q&A stuff that you do with, your colleagues, realistically, like everybody. So all of those, I just love it because there's so many different kind of varying opinions and different questions. So because we have loads to get through, we're literally just going to kind of like crack on with stuff because I know you're massively busy at the same time and you've got loads to be getting on with. So we are just going to be cracking on. But first of all, before we go on to it, just like, how are you? How are things going? How's Emily doing? And
good. Living the all-season life right now. So my weight's back up to like 239-ish first thing in the morning. So really good spot to be in productive-wise, still fairly lean. And Emily's doing well as well. She's kind of just still getting through some of the post-show blues phase a little bit, just kind of accepting the fact that we can't be shredded year-round. But performance is skyrocketing. She's feeling a lot better. So things are moving in the right direction for the both of us. Just kind of probably setting our sights on 2023. So taking 2022 off to travel, do some seminar work. We've got actually heading your way for a couple. So I will be announcing those hopefully in the next month or two, but it looks like we've got 2 or 3 on the schedule for the UK. So
excited.
So it'll 2022 be about traveling, doing seminars wherever and that kind of stuff. And then look to compete in 23 probably.
Amazing. That's all cool. Well, nobody's interested in my progress, and people can look at my stories for that. So I'm not going to bother with that one because, again, we are just going to like crack on with all of the things. So we've got like so many different questions, and they have no kind of thought to them, and there's no process. So we're just going to kind of like crack on with some. That's all we're going to do. Right. Hey Luke, big fan. That's very nice, isn't it? From Billy372.
Love it.
Hi, Billy. So notice that you wear glasses in and out of the gym. Have you ever thought about contacts instead of wearing glasses? And if so, what are the pros and cons?
Oh, man, I prefer contacts. It's just my lazy ass doesn't want to go to the eye doctor. No shit. Like, I really prefer contacts. I just ran out of my last prescription. So there's no real thought process there other than I just don't want to go to the eye doctor and make the time to do it. I'm one of those people that just like shoves non-important responsibilities over to the side until I get a time to do it. And it's just been that 9 months since I've needed to do it and just haven't made the time for it. So my glasses are tight enough where they don't move around and stuff during training. So and I actually kind of prefer glasses from like just like dry contact type of a thing.
For sure.
I have a tendency to stare at a computer all day. My head fucking hurts like crazy after staring at a computer all day with contacts in. So I've just kind of switched over to glasses permanently.
That's fair enough. I started actually trialing some contact lenses, and you know what? I've got these weird rugby shape eyes. So I've got to have specific like enteric ones or something like that. I either have monthlies or dailies. And I did the monthly ones. I'm like, oh, these are so great. I love them. I can't even feel them. I went to the gym, and because I was doing stiff leg deadlifts from a deficit, you know how like you scrunch your face up and stuff? I squeezed my eyes that tight that I split one of them in my eye.
Oh, Jesus. Yeah, no, I'll probably be on glasses for a hot minute. I've just learned to love them. So, plus it kind of gives the educator vibes, right? Like,
yeah.
So, no.
We wear the geeky glasses, but we can still lift some heavy ass weight. Right.
So I can't wear hats anymore because of the glasses. So that's the only downfall.
Oh, that is a downfall. You just need to have a bigger, like one of those adjustable ones, or a beanie. Just wear a beanie.
May go the beanie route.
That's it. We'll do that. Okay, so a PED question, actually. This one's quite an interesting one. So cycle gaps, or otherwise known as bridging, would you recommend using a SARM or pro hormone to bridge the gap in between a cycle?
Nope. I would argue that the SARMs realm is not to the point where we should even be utilizing them at all. Same with pro hormones. I think that the only one you could possibly make a case for is osterine, as like a progression in female deployment of that. But if you're bridging, you just need to be bridging on injectables and doing low doses of that and some sort of hormone replacement therapy type format, in my opinion. I found a lot of utility in bridging being some combination of test with like a really low dose DHT derivative alongside some growth hormone as like the best environment for managing health outcomes across the board. Most people don't even need the DHT because the whole point of HRT is to have a test dose where we're finding that right balance within physiological range, and then maybe some slight elevation of estradiol, but probably not. Just some people on the more sensitive side will benefit from the presence of a DHT within the bridging process. So like example for me, like a commonly one would be somewhere around like 50 mgs EOD of test, which is like 150 a week, with 50 mgs, 40 to 50 mgs EOD of like a primo.
Right. Okay.
And that keeps me around upper reference range. So like that 950 nanograms per deciliter. And my health metrics will be spot on. So again, very independent, but just some numbers thrown that way. If you're bridging, probably need to be in that lower echelon of HRT. And we could have the argument of strictly medical HRT and performance HRT, right? It's two different things. Probably should make that delineation as well, as that there is a difference between strict medical HRT and performance HRT within the realm of bodybuilding, but we do need to kind of accept the risks that come with what we would call performance HRT, because there is more risk involved. But yeah, I think that's probably where we're at with the bridging part. And then I don't really like the whole blast and cruise concept because I think it throws out the window our capacity to progress PEDs as a vector over time, in the sense that we can make small stack elevations per time unit and elicit a better result over a long term. So when we talk about PEDs, like in the blast cruise type of a thought process, the initial deployment of PEDs into a blast is an elevation from this performance HRT, which is typically around 250 to 300 mgs total for most people. And it jumps into like over a gram, right? Like just straight out the gate, which is okay. It's fine. I mean, it's what people have been doing for years, but I think we're missing the ability to take progress at lower levels that there for us, maintain health metrics across a longer term, and then possibly have a longer vector of progress where when we make that jump, Jesus, Emily, when we make that jump, then what we're doing is probably
it really needs you. You can answer it and I can edit it. It's cool.
No, it's okay. There's nothing she needs me that bad for.
Okay.
We just did a sales consult thing. It's fine. Where was I going with this? Oh, where health metrics like 10 to 12 weeks down the line are already skewed because we took such a large aggressive elevation, right? And we could possibly tick up in 50 to 75 mg elevations from performance HRT and take progress in a more linear fashion across a longer time period and end up with a net result that's greater instead of this blast cruise concept.
Yeah, for sure. One thing I wanted to actually say about the cycle gaps and the bridging using SARMs, even like a case for low dose osterine, realistically, your lipids are never going to recover if you are going to be increasing that. Is that right?
Yeah, and I would also say that Typically within the deployment of ostarine, we're looking at trying to minimize exposure to anabolics within females and allowing that kind of be like a progressive thought process from ostarine into anabolics. So it wouldn't warrant it within a bridging because you've already exposed yourself to anabolics there. I would possibly make the argument that the efficacy of ostarine is still really low,
Sure.
and that we have to consider that on the timeline of competing. So safer use is about matching mitigating risks alongside the timeline that's associated with the goal.
Yeah.
And having that communicative process with your client of, if we do the lowest progression of stack design over time, we can use it extends the timeline to the longest timeline that we could map out, right?
Yeah.
If the timeline's a bit shorter, we have to be slightly more aggressive in the way that we progress an individual across those levels of stack design. Now, that doesn't mean we don't utilize all of the pathways of hypertrophy that we can mediate according to using compounds, but it does mean that we have to understand that balance of timeline versus risk mitigation, and that not to certain coaches out there, so not to use a name, the levels in which they're just jumping girls or guys onto straight out the gate are eliciting a result that is very fast on the acute level, but from the long-term perspective is probably leaving them in a worse spot. And that's the difference, right? It's like you can't expect the same acute 8-week response to large escalations in cycle design or total cycle load versus the safer use model of taking shorter or smaller elevations of stack design. But the difference is where did this person end up? So instead of ending 8, 10, 12, 13 weeks into it with a CBC that is all in the red, blood pressure that's like 150 over 90 and things along those lines, and an HDL that's in the single digits, now we've gone 19 weeks with all of that in range, and we've taken more progress over the 19 weeks than we did in the 12. Right. So again, expectations is key. We always want to lean towards the safer use. But I will argue that with the timelines that most clients are associated with, probably not deploying ostarine very often.
I totally agree with that side of things as well. There's so many different other routes that you can use rather than actually going down the SARMs route realistically. So yeah, okay, grand. So that's another one. And I'll carry on with the PED kind of thing and try and get some kind of structure into this, because otherwise, we're going to do the whole jump around thing. Right. So I want to grow my glutes. This is obviously coming from a female. I want to grow my glutes. Do I have to use PEDs in order to grow my glutes more efficiently rather than training naturally?
Simple answer is PED usage will promote growth at a faster rate, right? Like that's just PED 101s. Can you get better training naturally? Yeah, sure, for sure. Again, it's rates, right? Rates of progress and setting timelines and expectations. So I think the important thing to do first would be to analyze how you're executing your training.
Yeah.
Before we jump into the PED versus non-PED realm, and looking to see if you're actually addressing the glute in all of its in ranges. So training it within like where it's strongest, within mid range, addressing like the stretched in range, which is our opportunity to drive a lot of tension through the glute, and then addressing the shortened in range with something like a glute bridge as well. But understanding that glute bridge is probably not the standard for glute development that we think that it is, because it is very shortened in range as far as where it addresses, and we have an opportunity to drive more mechanical tension stimulus through mid to lengthen, depending on how into the lengthen you go, because of just muscle's capacity to exert force along the different portions of a range. So having that understanding might push someone to looking at their training setups first and then making the decision on PEDs or not.
Yeah, I agree with that side of things too. One of a really good example that you can use is powerlifters. So powerlifters deadlift and they squat. And I don't know about you, but I have never seen a powerlifter with a small ass.
Not many, at least. No, it's fucking donk you can sit a Coke can on. It's like fucking,
Exactly, right? It's
yeah.
just like you want junk in the trunk. You're gonna have to just lift heavy and harder and stop doing all of these like glutey kickbacks with a booty band and crab walks and shit like that. It really annoys me. Do you know I was in the gym the other day and I was doing my hack squats, right? And I was screaming like hell because my hack squat sets are disgusting. And I don't really care what anybody thinks of me in the gym, so I'm going to be nice and noisy anyway. And there were these two girls on the cable stack, and they were doing kickbacks. And I did 3 sets of my hack squats, which took me around about 45 minutes, including all of my warm-ups and stuff like that. Do you know they were still doing single leg kickbacks? And they were completely just hyperextending their back and leaning over, and they were literally doing nothing. And she was like, "Oh, I feel it in my hamstrings." It's like, well, no shit, Sherlock, because you're not exactly doing it correctly.
Oh man, it's so funny. You'll see people do that kind of stuff and drive so much lumbar compression. It's like, yeah, you're not putting yourself in a position, first off, to exert force, but second off, you're choosing a movement that's not going to allow you to exert force through the target tissue. Yeah, it's crazy. I think maybe there might be some utility within pre-potentiation within shortened in range stuff like kickbacks, depending on the kickback setup. But that would be about it, and there shouldn't be work sets done within that. But yeah, I think that we really need to start to kind of maybe have a better understanding of glutes when we're trying to grow them. Like, where do they act? Like,
Yeah. You know that series that you do with John Jewett, like why your quads aren't growing, why your back isn't growing? Do one on the glutes.
we have a lot of content coming out on all of that in like 3 weeks. So just stay tuned.
Yay.
Don't really want to kind of steal the thunder on the announcement there, but a lot of stuff coming from within like every body part addressing a lot of that kind of stuff. But I think, just some quick misconceptions on glutes is like, we probably don't need to be in A frame for everything that we're doing, right? Because that's going to be pre-shortening the glutes. We want to try to drive a moment arm of hip extension from where the hips are relative to where the load's applied. A little bit more biased rather than knee travel over toe.
Yeah.
I would argue that most people's squat patterns drive it enough where you don't really have to worry about it or think about it. Just depending on how you squat. Like if you look like an Olympic weightlifter squatting, then we might have to look at changing the squat pattern a little bit. But and then that would be kind of across all of your single leg variations, into your leg press variations. Like, not high and wide is not a glute based leg press, right? That's pre-stretching the glutes and the hamstrings. They're not driving a lot of tension through that, not exposing it to like that stretched in range where it has to take on load. And so just modifying your setups in order to allow for glute involvement to be there. A lot of times within like squatting patterns, it's going to be an involvement of glute and quad. So just be aware of that.
Yeah.
And then using an RDL rather than a stiff leg. So we know that relative degree of knee bends going to involve glute relative to hamstring on a differentiation. Approximately 30 degrees of knee bend is where glute starts to take over. We don't have to use a goniometer, but that's just a moderate knee bend. So maybe hip hinging with that cue of slight knee bend, drive the hips back rather than that shoulder over bar cue for a stiff leg, probably would preferentiate glute development.
Yeah, for sure. Love it. Love it. Okay, so different one. We're just going to move over onto some nutrition aspects now. Stomach blowout. How do you control that in the off season? See, this one's an interesting one because I found that there's quite a lot of people on the Olympia stage as well who actually have Diastasis Recti. So they have that tear, and it's really, really prominent when you're lean.
How do you manage it? This is so cross variable. First things to look at is going to be, how's your digestion, right? Do you have things on a digestive standpoint that you have to address before you even start to push food up? So that would be your classic cases of just like IBS management, maybe even SIBO, things along those lines. Address those before you start trying to drive an aggressive surplus. Okay. Secondarily would be, and this would probably be a subcategory within that, is like understanding your food tolerances, like what are you able to eat that digests well, things along those lines. And then looking as you progress food up to moving yourself from hunger management based food options, like in a prep situation, to things that are going to move through you a bit quicker and going to be a lot more calorically dense per volume, right?
Mm-hmm.
Those are going to be the main ones. Now, ones that are often not addressed is like maintaining a consistent like tension throughout your midsection and core. So like when I'm sitting here, like I'm not just relaxing and letting my stomach hang over my belt, right? Those kinds of things. Keeping a consistent step count, as much as you may not realize like how much of a big role that has in nutrient partitioning. It's going to aid in motility at a large scale. And so keeping those kinds of things up will help. Doing vacuum-based practices, even within the off season, which is going to be structured according to your propensity to be able to do that. But then also learning how to correctly diaphragmatic breathe, just because that will maintain a resting midsection pressure that will allow for a little bit better midsection control, typically, right? So there's some obvious, some not so obvious, right? Things that we're probably using with clientele to limit that. And I think it's a cross examination of your daily habits and your nutritional habits.
For sure.
Will limit that.
I think that links in very nicely with the next question as well, which is your thoughts on flexible dieting versus a diet plan. So just to follow on with that one, you can give somebody like macros and just say, right, you're going to do this without, like, just say, for example, I know that you don't do it, but just say, for example, there are a lot of coaches out there who will literally just give macros without any kind of meal timing advice. So a lot of people can just backload a crap load of carbs and then just sit there and just have a little feast before they go to bed and then wonder why they have this big stomach blowout. So yeah, I mean, your thoughts on flexible dieting versus a diet plan.
Also disrupting sleep patterns with that too. Like you can massively disrupt sleep patterns with too large of a bolus of food before bed. But I'm a big fan of what's I call a dual meal plan. So it's a meal plan mapped out for someone with the associated macros along the side for every food item, so that they can just follow the plan if they just want to follow the plan, or they can make some easy substitutions because all the macros are listed for every food item there next to the side of it. So I think when we look at if it fits your macros, the concept should have been used within the construct of structure rather than willy-nilly-ness that it's kind of become famous for.
Yeah.
And so like when John and I talk about it, we'll talk about it in like the terms of like bodybuilders, if it fits your macros, because we're changing rice for cream of rice or cream of rice for oatmeal, or we're changing like across the common food groups that we're going to utilize within bodybuilding, right?
Sure.
We're not changing cream of rice for Pop-Tarts, right? Like it's just, there's so much wrong with that like I'm not even going to take the time to go and explain it. But that's kind of where I feel like it fits, because I may like have changed my opinion on this a little bit just over time. I really think the construct of a meal plan only is typically within the confines of a contest prep.
Yes.
There is a lot of utility within the off season to allow someone to do the dual meal plan setup, because their desire to go eat bullshit and things off plan drastically reduces when homeboy that has chicken, eggs, and rice for their last meal at night is like, I want something sweet. It's like, okay, go make Pro Oats. Go make a chocolate whey bowl of Pro Oats with some nut butter on it, and that will curb any kind of sweet flavor that you have, right? So again, what's the goal? The goal is still to move our physique forward, manage digestion, use foods that we know aren't on the sensitivity scale for us, and then move that forward with how, if it fits your macros, fits into your plan.
Yeah, for definitely. And the inflammatory response, I just want to give you a bit of honestly, even if you think that you can eat quote unquote clean foods, even clean foods can be bad for you if you have that intolerance like you were talking about and whatever response that you have. So I've got a bikini girl who basically told me that she was eating the same thing absolutely every single day. She did her check-in 6 weeks out, and I phoned her. I got onto a FaceTime with her, and I just said, you're not coming in. And you're not coming in because something is obviously disrupting your digestive system. So how do you feel about me writing your meal plan? And that's going to be it. So she was like, I'll do whatever it takes. I did a meal plan for her. Within 10 days, she lost 4 pounds. And that was all through inflammatory markers. So, and her food focus just completely went. She had more time because she didn't have to get on a freaking phone and just like put in what she's going to have because of tracking these macros and stuff. And I'm like, oh, so you weren't eating the same thing then every day. So you were kind of having that.
And I get it, man. Like, I get the desire to want to change things out. I mean, I'm not one of those people. I eat what's on the plan. Like, it's not like I'm making myself do that. It's just, I just don't want to think about it. Like, I just want to write the plan. I just want to do it. Emily, on the other hand, is Miss Free Spirit Willy Nilly over here, where she's like wanting to substitute things in and out. Right. So I get the like psychological mindset of having that freedom. But I think that there's structure within the freedom that allows it to be productive. Right. Definitely. So even going as far as making food lists for people that like categorizes the foods that don't respond well with them and do respond well with them so that they can make those substitutions for themselves. I think it's very useful.
Yeah. I don't know if you ever use it, but do you use like a bloat diary or a digestive diary?
To an extent, it's more like as we tweak the fine tunes of the meal plan, it'll start to go under a category on the documents that's like foods that cause issues. And so it's kind of built into the tracking documents rather than them having a personal diary. But the personal diary is part of the process of finding those issues.
Yeah, for sure.
So typically, like even in the confines of an off season, I'm having clients upon intake like, hey, like, let's just follow the meal plan for a bit, like to a T, so that I can make sure that these food choices are doing well with you, so that we can start to find out what those problematic foods are and what aren't. And then we can start to move into more flexible approaches within the foods that we know do well and don't do well with you. And, you know, some people learn the hard way, some people do it the right way, but I think they're very useful. I think eventually there needs to be a transition from having to diary that every single day or every single week into information that we've collected data on so that we just know.
Yeah.
And then there.
Yeah, definitely. I'm the same. So for the first kind of like week or 2 weeks, I will have them actually document how they feel, and I'll get them to send me their meals and just say, right, how was your digestibility? How was your bloat? How did you feel? Were you sluggish? Did you have heartburn? Certain questions like that. And then I'll obviously tweak things alongside. So this is why feedback and check-ins are really, really important. And obviously communicating with your coach is a really good thing too. Cool beans.
Real quick, even something as simple as like a Bristol stool chart scale on your check-in, super useful, right? Like that's has a lot of utility. So that could probably be just utilized over the long term where it's like, oh, my stools are not where they're supposed to be, but we got a problem, right? So yeah, this is kind of a simple way to transition it as well.
Definitely. See, always talk to your coach about your poop. It's important. It really is. Right. Okay. So let's have a training one. Oh no, in fact, this one's a really good one because I am conscious of time. I don't want to take up too much of it. Glucose disposal glucose disposal agents use post training. Are you a fan or not?
You should be a glucose disposal agent post training, right? For regulation.
Yeah.
No. Just no.
Just no.
No.
Unless you've spent all day doing like your glute kickbacks and then you're not really.
Let's and maybe like I hate broad statements. So there is utility in rapid insulin use post training within larger individuals when food is at its highest.
For sure.
So like we're talking the dude that's like consuming 100 to 150 grams during training, and then the post-training meal is like 100 to 150 grams as well.
Mm-hmm.
Little Humalog goes a long ways, right? So yes, in that instance. Beyond that, probably not, because of the simple glucose transport upregulation that training causes. Like, we're probably not needing it.
No, not particularly. And I think that's where people get confused. They see these massive bodybuilders and they use insulin usage post-workout. They're like, okay, well, I'll use a metformin, or I'll use a GD8 or like a berberine or something. To be fair, I'm quite a big fan of berberine, especially with women who have like PCOS and things like that. It works very, very well. But like you said, unless you're like a 300-pound stage 3 bodybuilder and you're going to be eating all of that kind of food around your workout window, it's pretty pointless.
And just some quick like follow-ups on that. That's acutely too, right? That's not
Yeah.
chronic insulin use.
No.
It's very acute, short windows of time, probably before you have to pull back on it, and actually probably pull back on the dietary load. And then on top of that, with the PCOS statement, I'd be curious, like metformin usage alongside berberine usage for that population can sometimes improve overall management. So just like cross using those,
Yeah, definitely.
preferentially metformin, right? That's medically indicated for PCOS, but yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree with that side of things as well. That's cool. Again, going into this one, are you a fan of using digestive enzymes? And if so, is there a better time to take them?
No, typically not, unless we know someone has like a deficiency in some sort of manner. Like, we should be probably supporting. And this is, I will admit that this is not an area of expertise for me, as far as like diversity within the microbiome is probably what our end goal is, and so we should be supporting that with a variety of different foods within the diet. So we're typically looking at like at least 3 different fat sources, 3 different carb sources, and 3 different protein sources within the plan, ideally. And then also on that too, like a lot of the digestive enzyme products aren't very well made and are very loaded in only specific ones. So it's like not allowing for a lot of utility as far as like in usage. And then like this kind of follows down the track of greens powders. And I'm not a fan, just because they're typically a large bolus dose of 1 or 2 type of fermentable products. And so like we're getting, again, driving something that's not going to promote diversity, because we're promoting a large bolus dose of 1 fermentable portion within that greens powder. So probably an area that's not my expertise. If you want a lot of content on that kind of stuff, as far as utility within probiotics, digestive enzymes, things along those lines, Vitamin PhD would be.
Yeah, she's amazing.
Resource for that. She's really good within this realm. So as far as like using with clients, I don't see utility and outcomes and improvements as far as usefulness of that typically.
Yeah, absolutely. You can spend so much money on all of these different supplements. You've probably seen it yourself. You know, you see this brand new thing on the TV and you're just like, oh, I'm going to go and buy that because that's the magic pill. That's the magic powder. And it's just like, well, actually, you know, just have a read into it because it's possibly a con.
It's probably more a product that you need to go through an elimination diet and figure out what's causing issues than it is that you need the digestive enzyme supplement in the first place.
Yeah.
And that would be kind of where I would push someone rather than a supplement.
Definitely. I don't know if you've ever come up against it. I thought it was really, really funny because I was having this complete mind boggle with one of my clients, and he was just like bloating out and having so many problems, and he was having like sulfur burps and various other bits like this. I'm like, this sounds really odd and I don't quite understand what's going on. We started doing this elimination diet, and what I found out that he was doing was that he was actually separating his eggs, so just having egg whites, like literally just having egg whites all of the time. So I said, just humor me a little bit and just have 1 whole egg and then mix it with your egg whites. The whole thing cleared up. The whole thing cleared up. And the whole reason for that is because, and this is exactly what we're talking about the microbiome and the digestive enzyme, the egg is whole for a specific reason. And it's because you need the yolk to digest the white. So if you're going to have egg whites as an addition for protein, please just include one yolk, because otherwise it's really difficult to digest.
It's actually funny you say that, because like to that extent, I don't write egg whites and plans as a protein source
For sure.
because of that, right? If I do, it's in conjunction, like just like you said, conjunction with whole egg usage.
Mm-hmm.
And I've even gone as far as, for some people who have issues with it, I mean, some don't, is like mixing protein sources in a whole eggs with a lean protein type of a thing, just to manage that, right? Because again, graded exposure, right? So we're having 12 egg whites with one whole egg. Like, I think that's probably a bad ratio to kind of have. So that's kind of where, like, I think, again, using that elimination based process to understand, like, okay, we definitely need like the yolk within eggs to understand how digestive processes are going to be with that protein source. So maybe we just use other protein sources.
Yeah, I agree with that side too. Okay, so this one is quite a good one. This is a two-part question. I'm gassing out when posing in the off season. How can I maximize my aerobic capacity so my fitness levels can keep up with the weight gain?
Activity.
Yeah, I know. I mean, it does seem as simple as
that. Higher step counts. I mean, no, but like, this is actually the conversation of utility of actual cardiovascular sessions within an off season, rather than just using step counts, is the elevation of heart rate to maintain cardiovascular capacity when body weight's at its heaviest.
Yeah.
Heart reasons and just training performance opposing reasons, probably is where a couple sessions a week is not going to limit you from progressing, and it's probably going to help you from a training perspective too, where the cardiovascular sessions are probably going to help. So like, if you're just using step counts, that might be part of the problem. Like getting that elevation in heart rate so that you can maintain that cardiovascular output.
I think that's another thing that a lot of people just kind of dismiss, is they're just using steps as their form of output. And the reason why I'm not really a big fan of it is because when I go for a walk and I walk my dog, I really get a brisk walk on. Do you know what I mean? It's like, you're not going to elevate your heart rate to like 140 or anything, but you get a good brisk walk on. Now, if I tell one of my colleagues or one of my mates to go for a walk, he will saunter like it's a Sunday morning. And it's like, those are two completely different type of steps. So I don't particularly like to use steps as a marker for activity. I actually like using cardiovascular work in different parameters as well. So like undulations. So you can use a medium intensity steady state, but then also use like some intervals at the same time. So just have that variance, and then just basically say, don't be an arsehole and sit on the sofa all day, just get out and go for a walk, because that's going to help promote circadian rhythm at the same time.
Yeah. I think we got to be careful with the interval stuff within managing someone across a contest prep.
Of course, yeah, definitely. You wouldn't do that because of fatigue.
Fatigue driving. I find a lot of utility in a combination of cardiovascular work and step counts, as in the cardiovascular work is a part of the step counts. Now, this is typically discussed in a different manner. Typically, we separate the cardiovascular activity from the step counts.
Yeah.
The only reason I like it is because it guarantees a portion of the step counts are done at a certain pace.
Sure.
So it's like, we have 13,000 total. You're doing a 25-minute cardio session at X pace on a treadmill. That guarantees that however many steps that you accumulate across those 25 minutes of the 13,000 you're doing that day is done at a clip that's going to elevate heart rate. So that's kind of where I try to combine the two typically. And then as weight goes down, start to find utility in using like a weight jacket, like a weight vest. Make up for the weight loss, to be honest. Because you prep some of these bigger dudes and it's like 30, 40, 45 pounds of weight loss. Like, and it's not like they started from a bad spot. It's just part of it. So steps become a lot less effective when you're pulling off that much poundage.
For sure. And do you know what? A lot of people find that the wrong way around, because it's like, if the heavier you are, the more calories you expend whilst you're doing cardio. It's like you doing 25 minutes on a bike, for example, would burn more calories than me doing 25 minutes on a bike, because I'm light. I'm lighter. I don't want to say that I'm light because I'm trying to be big, but I'm lighter. I'm still tiny, but I'm lighter than you. So even though I could possibly go harder and I could still burn less than you, which is really fucking annoying. But it is just one of those things that we have to take into consideration. So the second part of that question is, how fat is too fat? He's already gassing out.
How fat is too fat? Oh,
yeah.
Gee. It's hard to talk from a visual perspective because people carry weight so differently. Like, I'm one of those people that you won't be able to see my midsection, but my quads will still be separated out, right? And I'll have like feathering in my glutes. So it's like, can we really use like the be able to see your abs typical suggestion as the cross suggestion across the board, right?
Mm.
That's going to be like a no. What I would say is typically for males around that 13 to 15% spot. We can estimate this with like caliper sites and things along those lines. But also understanding that like where you're productive might be different than where someone else is productive. I have a couple clients that like 11% mark is like max body comp that they can push.
Really?
And it's like, just like your genetically leaner individuals, right? It's like they start fucking huffing and puffing going upstairs when they get to that point. And it's like someone like me, like I can get up to like 15, 16% and be very productive still. So range is important there. But you should always be within, I don't want to say striking distance of a contest prep, because I do think there's utility in pushing past the start of a contest prep look. But that start of a contest prep look is typically around that 13, 14% for males. And so when we push past that, that's kind of like the point where we come back.
Yeah.
Get back to that start point.
Well, do you think there's actual merit in just getting fat if you want to have a really quick off season?
No.
No, I don't either.
I think you're setting yourself up for a disastrous prep.
It's mad, isn't it? There are so many differing opinions, and just saying, if you want to gain the most amount of muscle, then you just have to get fat. But it's like people just they disregard things like internal health, because if you are internally unhealthy, you're not going to be productive in terms of gaining the type of tissue that you want to gain. You're just going to get fat.
AJ and I had a debate about this, or not a debate, a discussion about this on one of our recent podcasts.
Yeah.
About how fat is too fat, and talking about like natural athletes needing to push it a little bit further. And he was talking about how he felt like he pushed it a bit too far this time. And I think that scale of where we can push it progressively gets lower on the body fat comp scale, the more tissue we accumulate.
Yeah.
So essentially it's like the bigger we get, the less we have to push it into those depths of like getting out of shape.
Yeah, I agree with that too. And do you find as well, like the more preps you do, even after the push-ups, that even if they are controlled, the more preps you do, the harder they become, the harder you've got to push?
Push up or down?
Push down.
I've actually found the opposite.
Have you?
It's probably a product of like, for myself, each start point has been better. So I'm starting in a better spot within each prep. And then with a lot of my clientele, it's like we've done a better job of managing the off season into the prep process. So it's like now that makes the prep easier, but all things given the same, I don't know, man. I still think it doesn't really matter whether, you're, it's going to suck either way. I think is what I'm getting to. You're going to feel like shit, whether it's the perfect prep or whether it's like a disastrous prep. I think the amount of tissue that you retain across a prep has a very big dependence upon how it's ran and
Sure.
fatigue management and stuff. So I would actually make the argument that because you get better at learning your body and managing the time periods between preps, that each prep should become easier from there. And if not, it probably suggests that something was done wrong in the interim. So you'll see this a lot with people who they start competing once every other year or once every third year. So they have that time to build the capacity within off season. Then they get to that national level and they're doing really well. So they start picking off preps closer together. And that time interim between preps is a lot shorter and they're not managing that time appropriately. So it makes the back end prep harder.
Yeah.
So from that viewpoint, like each prep gets harder, but it's strictly because the time in between is a lot shorter and not managed as well in order to set up the next one. So I think that the clarity within that would be, is it just because you're progressing in your bodybuilding career and not managing the interim time between is what making the prep harder the more you do?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I like that one. Okay, so I think, you know what? We're actually getting through these quite well. Okay, last one. Thoughts on using yohimbine during fasted cardio in the off season?
No. Why? Why would you be trying to drive fatty acid mobilization during a time of a surplus? I don't see the utility.
No.
No. I mean, that should be a tool that you keep in your pocket for like a diet phase, right? Like
Mm,
if you're all season like mini cutting, then yeah,
mm,
using it alongside. Man, I even hesitate to suggest that, like using it alongside a clan within like a diet phase in all season. But I think there's utilization for mild deployment of those within recomps,
mm.
just because the rate of progress type of a variable. Like it's another thing we can include in order to make the rate of progress on a week to week basis. Because within recomps, the end goal is not fucking shredded. It's just get
Sure.
me to a better spot, right? The sooner I can get that person to a better spot, the sooner we can start growing again. So I don't see issues with deployment of like yohimbine and clen within those recomp phases,
Mm.
especially within females, because we know the tissue retention side of clen.
Yeah.
So we can use that within like these bridge things if we're recomping between pushes to maintain the tissue and still improve the parameters of recomping.
Mhm.
I mean, do you use yohimbine with anybody within the off-season parameters?
Not within an off season. No, absolutely.
Yeah, I don't see dietary compound deployment is going to cause a net stress elevation. I mean,
Mm.
it's central nervous system stimulating, so I don't see why we would want to take away capacity of the recovery capacity just from a deployment of a compound that's not overly useful in that
It's
phase.
not necessary. I think it was because there was quite a big video that went round socially not so long back in terms of using your himbine during fasted cardio in the off season to just help maintain some level of leanness. But realistically, I think they were talking about maybe like 5 milligram or something like that in your himbine. And in the grand scheme of things, depending on how heavy you get and how big you get, that's not really going to do anything, especially for the amount of time you're going to be doing as fasted cardio in the off season.
How about try not eating like an asshole? That's
Well,
great.
yeah, that's another thing, you know.
But and I think of certain things in terms of vectors of progress.
Mm,
We're always moving in one direction, whether that be surplus accumulating tissue
yeah.
or recomping deficit or prep deficit, right? I this maintenance thing, I don't the logic behind it doesn't make a lot of sense unless it's that short phase between all season and the start of prep where we've gotten the body comp to where it needs to be, but we don't want to drive the deficit quite yet.
Mm, mm.
Ability there. I've yet to hear the argument of like a maintenance phase have a lot of logic and utility
See,
outside of that.
I've got a friend at the moment, and it makes me laugh a little bit because of you just saying this one. I have a friend at the moment. He is I think he's 4 weeks post show now, and his coach has basically not allowed him to have any more food. at all just yet. So he had a little bit of a bump when he came off contest prep, and now he's held him for like 4 weeks. He says, I don't want your weight to go up yet. I want to keep it here. It's like, really?
Food factor is the most sensitive post prep. We should use the food factor. Oh man, I've been on this post contest thing recently just because of the way I've seen some people come to me recently. It's like your proclivity to accumulate body fat post show is so high. There's even a study that Trexler did in 2017. Yes, 2017. Yeah. That is looking at this post show phase in like a kind of like a case study type setting. And I can send you the citation if I need to. Our proclivity to accumulate muscle tissue within that phase is so low.
Yeah.
And it's so prioritized towards fat accumulation. It's like, why, and this is getting into compounds again, why are we driving such an aggressive take at trying to accumulate tissue with continuation of blasting post-show, driving food parameters extremely high straight out the gate, and then driving the training variables extremely high straight out the gate, when we probably should be recovering from the net fatigue that we've accumulated over the last 20 to 22 weeks of prepping, fixing that, probably fixing our body fat ratio standards. So like, we're not very productive at a contest lean body composition. It's quite a bit up from a body fat or a lean, that amount of leanness that we're productive. So we have a lot of progress to be taking just with food alone. Use that and reinstate health markers and then push up with all these other variables, right? Training should start at rock bottom. We probably are even for the crowd that trained to failure. Having that first week be with reps in reserve should almost be treated like a deload week. So it's almost like hitting a reset button. Like, we need to hit the reset button so that we can be productive. And again, this is the acute versus the long, right? Like, if you're turning around and prepping again in 15 weeks, be a little bit more aggressive. But if you're really trying to improve your physique over the long term, take the time to use the food vector, reinstate your training capacity. Once those plus health markers are in check, then let's push. And timeline wise, we're looking like 6 to 10 weeks post show.
Yeah.
How hard is it to use that as our main progress factor for 6 to 10 weeks?
We had this conversation in the last one that we did, didn't we? It was just like, don't just start with a boatload of drugs afterwards. Have that 2-step kind of approach. So start with your food, because food is like the most anabolic tool that we have anyway. Start with food. Once you get to that certain point, then you can start, and you can have almost like a double rebound effect from post show. And I don't know why people are just not actually thinking, you know what, I'll just use more food. Eat more food, work harder in the gym, and then recover better.
Agreed. Just take into account your psychological proclivities. So like, if you're really struggling with the post-show blues type thought process, like, could suggest some different ways of progressing that post-show phase from a psychological standpoint. But that would be about it, right? I don't see it. I don't see the continuation of the blast. And not to say that I haven't done it, because fuck, I've done it, but changed my mind very much on that.
Yeah, for sure. So there you go. Right, guys, I have taken up so much of Luke's time already, and I know that he's massively busy. So like I said, this has been an awesome episode as per usual. I love having you on. I just love having a conversation with you anyway, because we get to geek and nerd out and shit. So I like doing that anyway. So we will have another conversation. I am more than sure of it, because I still have like 20 odd questions, a lot of them to do with training and stuff as well, that we didn't even kind of get into. So I will invite you back for another part 2. But for now, thank you so much for your time, guys. Do the whole usual shizzle. like, share, subscribe. Go onto Luke's podcast as well, the No Switch Fitness podcast. He's got some epic episodes in there as well. And also listen to his other stuff that he is doing with Mr. John Jewett, because again, he is a fantastic and phenomenal educator. All of the plugs today. But until next time, I will see you very, very soon. Luke, thanks once again. I shall catch up with you in a bit.
Thanks, Vicky. Much appreciated.